Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, our roundtable. This segment is community outreach. We are globally connected with Kaiser Health News. Today is Saturday, October 1st, 2022. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our panelist on the line, Mr. Darius Tahir. He's a tech correspondent with Kaiser Health News, and he focuses on how technology affects healthcare. We're going to talk about an article he has written, embedded. It's called on kaiserhealthnews.org or khn.org, embedded, how medical records show discrimination. And what we're going to talk about is the discrimination that's going on and how doctors look at you. Tell us about that, Mr. Tahir.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. I'm here in D.C. And it's very wet, so I feel very damp.
That's my hometown, so I appreciate you on the weather update. So tell us. So I read your article. It's very, very interesting. However, a lot of people, I would say, probably are not surprised by some of your conclusions. Tell us about bias and also what people are perceiving as doctors when they see certain groups of people. And it goes deeper than skin color. It goes into a lot of different things. We'll talk about that. But explain to us the implicit bias that you saw when you were doing your research.
That's right. Yeah, no, bias is a part of it. And it's about the sort of communications we have with one another, or doctors have with one another. They keep records, and that's sort of a baton that they hand back and forth. And so the descriptions they write in those records are supposed to be informative about, what a patient felt when. Does the patient have, chest pain? Does they do they not sleep well? That's the theory, at least. In practice, however, many doctors can transmit their own personal prejudices about the patient. So, for example, they can transmit, signals about their, socioeconomic status, about their race or their gender. And so what my article focused on is what happens when a doctor, is too devoted, shall we say, to transmitting, a false impression, a knee-jerk impression about a patient. Are they sort of suggesting that the patient is just there to get, some powerful, drugs? Or are they saying this is, a very trustworthy patient, that we really need to devote our best efforts, to treat and to cure? And what I found in researching this story is that many patients, whether it's people of color, black patients, Hispanic patients, other patients, or oftentimes women, or people of who may not be as financially successful as other patients. When those patients arrive at the doctor, oftentimes they're sort of stereotyped, and that stereotype goes into the records, and that affects the care that they get from future doctors. And that can be a powerful anchor in terms of the care you get in the future, as to whether you get the full attention or whether you get, suspicion and skepticism from your doctors.
I wanted to read this part of your article. I thought this really kind of sums it up, and it opens up a lot of questions, but also it's kind of scary when you think about it. And it sounds so, when I read this, it's going to sound so technical and also so cold in a way. Quote, compliance with medical therapy, health of both individuals, blood type, comorbidities, ability to care for themselves and be stable in post-transplant social support system. Not all potential recipients and donors meet those criteria. This is what someone said in the article, quote, as a person was who quoted this, I'm quoting in the article. So this was something that was quoted. So basically saying that I'm going to make a judgment as to whether or not, if you need a kidney transplant, or if you need a liver transplant, or if you need some type of life-saving medical procedure, I may prioritize you based on my own judgment, whether or not I feel that you are going to do the things that we think you should be doing in order to maintain it? Is it going to be worth it, or are there more worthy candidates? When you're thinking to yourself, well, if I need a kidney or I need a liver, they're not going to prioritize me. It's first come, first serve, right? But they're going no, well, not exactly. They have criteria, as I just read, as to who gets what and when.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So to just back up a little bit, the kind of one of the stories, one of the patients I profiled in my article was a gentleman named David Confer, who was a bicyclist and audio technician here in Washington, D.C. He was black. He had suffered from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and as part of his treatment, eventually needed a transplant, kidney transplant. And during his care, the doctors and social workers who assessed him essentially came to believe that he was not a good candidate for a liver transplant. His partner, a woman named Kate Cohen, kind of talked to me and felt that the way he was described in the record was not something she recognized. They felt, or she felt, that he was sort of implicitly being belittled by the way he was described, that he was described as somebody who would drink a 12-pack of beer, every day, when in fact, he was not that voluminous a drinker. And so because of that, she felt that the, medical system developed this belief that if they were to do a liver transplant, that, he would just, and I'm doing scare quotes here, kind of waste the transplant and not be, again, a scare quote here, deserve that transplant. And so that's kind of an example of how, you can communicate certain beliefs, certain biased beliefs about a patient through this record. And it's very hard, if you're a patient, to rebut those beliefs, if they're incorrect.
I'm going to read your title again. Embedded: How Medical Records Sow Discrimination. Is available on KHN.org and also on the Daily Beast and anywhere you can find this article if you Google it. And also, we're going to see if we can get it on our AHD.org as well. This goes down to really, and it's kind of, it's hard to really say it, but it's almost as if doctors are playing God, literally. But I mean, we want to, we feel thankful and we're blessed to have doctors, because doctors do provide life-saving treatment. Doctors do have the skills and the training and the techniques and the technology to help us. But in some cases, it appears that, and as we've seen like throughout history, there is certain types of biases and perceptions that don't allow everyone to get equity when it comes to getting health care. This idea, for example, that you kind of touched on in your article, and if this has been talked about with many doctors, the idea that certain groups of, or races of people can perceive pain or take pain better than others. So therefore, we don't need to prescribe pain medication. One doctor actually talked about this. There was a study where they actually went out and surveyed doctors and asked them if they felt if there was actual biological differences between races, or for example, do African Americans, is their bodies this way versus non-African Americans, or Asian Americans this way versus non-Asian Americans. And it was surprising that healthcare students, doctors in medical school, and physicians all showed bias, that they actually believed unscientific, unproven myths that people had different biologies. If for some reason your blood, my blood might be different other than the blood type, but for some reason your blood might, if I have O positive and you have O positive, for some reason my O positive might be better or worse than yours. Yes. Yeah. I mean, there have been a lot of, kind of very strange and unscientific beliefs about, how different races differ biologically that, have affected care, certainly. So, I mean, to me, that's racial profiling. That was a 2016 study. It was done by Dr. Norman Oliver, Kelley Hoffman, and Sophie Trelter. This was an actual study from the University of Virginia. You can look that up on and Google that as well. So the thing of it is that when we're talking about healthcare, isn't my money the same as your money, or if my insurance company is paying for it? So how does who pays for the care affect treatment?
Well, that's a great question. That wasn't necessarily touched on by my care, or by the article. But certainly there's profiling. I think that's a verb you used about the socioeconomic status of a patient, and that plays on certainly doctors and other clinicians' mind when it comes to taking a patient, seriously, or, sort of believing that perhaps they're, out for something else, or, can't be trusted to perceive their own conditions correctly. So certainly there's an element of, of assessment of patients, financial means in the back of many doctors' minds.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, when we talk about medical records, and the things you touched on in the article directly was there were certain things that some of the people you interviewed, they read that wasn't accurate. They felt that these were things that the doctor kind of just, had them ran off in their own tangent and ran off in an area that wasn't really 100% truthful, and it actually affected their care. The person you talked about, Confer, passed away because he didn't get treatment.
Yes.
Now, the thing is that is there two different sets of records or books, so to speak? So where there's one that you see on your app or your, I use MyChart, for example. MyChart, I can communicate with my doctors. I can see notes and things of that nature. Is there a separate set of notes that we should be seeing?
No, there's just one record, and as a result of some kind of regulatory changes, we're going to see kind of more and more of your own records. You're going to be able to see many of the notes doctors write about you, and sort of that the product of that is going to make notes less private. It used to be that notes were sort of private communications between doctors, and sort of now they're more shared. And so that, a product of that is perhaps going to be to expose, some of the biases that, some doctors might have in terms of assessing the patients that they see.
Mm-hmm. So how can patients protect themselves? What's the best way when they feel like that they're not getting the care that they're getting, or that maybe aren't quite sure that they're being heard? What are some things that they can do to kind of get better outcomes?
Well, as I sort of mentioned earlier, we're going to be able to see records more easily now in the coming months. So you should be able to just see what doctors say about you more readily. In terms of what to do about it, that's tricky. I spoke to one doctor who, kind of told me that, she had seen, incorrect things in her own record. And she admitted to me that, she was a little scared to point that out to her doctor because she worried that her doctor, wouldn't like her and wouldn't, care for her in the same way that he had before. So it is tricky. Certainly, if you're polite but persistent, that may have an effect on many doctors, but it's not guaranteed. So I think that's a tricky problem for sure.
I'm a proponent of firing the doctor. I mean, if you have a doctor that's not talking to you or not, you feel like there is miscommunication, is other doctors out there. I say go find you a better doctor. I've changed doctors many times. I've had heart conditions and things I've been treated for. I'm not sitting with a doctor that's not listening to me, but the question
I think that's a very rational attitude.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But the thing is, but then once again, unless those records are open and people are being diligent enough to actually use the software, like I use MyChart, for example. Not all hospitals are affiliated with MyChart. There's other apps that are out there. You have to check with your hospital and see who they're affiliated with, and then make sure you're keeping up with those records. But oftentimes, like you kind of alluded to, people don't feel comfortable enough or feel confident enough to really step up and say, hey, just as a one-off story, I mentioned I had a heart condition. I talked to my cardiologist one time, and I swear I thought she was going to just, whip out a bat and start beating me because she was. We got into it. We got into it. We had a moment. She's telling me to take just do this procedure. Just do this procedure. It's no big deal. I'm like, well, what's involved with it? Wait, look it up online. It's just this being dismissive. And I'm like, I'm not going to no, it doesn't work that way. I'm not, this is my body. I'm not just going to do whatever just because you say do it. So we
Yeah,
got into
no,
it. And that was a hot moment.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be active in your own care.
So where do you see the future in this? Do you see that? Where do you see the next step for people becoming more aware and more active at speaking up to their doctors? And what things do we need to do to understand this better?
Well, to your earlier point, if you can look in your own record and kind of either speak to your own doctor or switch doctors, I think that might have a powerful effect in the future. But I'm not an oracle, so I can't predict anything.
Mm-hmm. I think that's critical. I think like we're saying is that as long as you are being more diligent and speaking up for yourself. We talk about this a lot, particularly with veterans, because oftentimes veterans either don't want to get care because they don't feel as comfortable in the environment, so they maybe avoid care altogether, or they're very good at complaining and bitching and moaning about the care. But to the civilian population, I think it's really critical that people, like you mentioned, go and look at those records and go and see what's being said. If your hospital is affiliated with some kind of app or a communication device like MyChart, look at your records on MyChart, see what they're saying about you, and make sure that it's accurate. And then you don't have to be confrontational, but at the same time, understand that this is your body. This is what you're going through. Your insurance company has no problem writing that check to somebody else. So if you are not feeling like you're being heard, or you feel like, and I've gone through this with family members, I've gone through this with loved ones. If you don't feel like you're being heard, you have to speak up and advocate for yourself. I think that's so important. Another thing I wanted to touch base on is the fact that this wasn't quite one of the things in your article, but it actually wastes money, because when doctors don't look at situations more thoroughly and kind of be aware of their bias, but then also take a time out to start to really try to communicate with their patients. When bias influences their treatment, it wastes money. $310 billion, we estimate. This was from a study from the Institute of Health Improvement. Also, there's a person that also talked about this on a YouTube video. He's the CEO of Be More America. $310 billion a year wasted on misdiagnosis attributed to bias, because people are saying, "Oh, you don't need these pain pills. You don't need this. You don't need that. I don't want to waste the treatment on you." And then now there's health consequences because of that.
Yeah, no, I kind of spoke in my article with an expert on misdiagnosis, a guy named Hardeep Singh, and he sort of said that misdiagnosis often happens with patients that doctors believe are difficult and document as difficult, and then that affects care going forward. So certainly it probably has an effect in terms of affecting the way doctors misdiagnose patients and suggest the wrong care for them.
So tell us, give us in the last 10 minutes we have to talk about this topic. What are some of the key things that that your article really kind of shed light to you? What did you get out of the article, and what was really profound to you mostly? That something that you learned that you really didn't really know before?
Well, I was surprised. It took me a while to report, and many of the people I spoke with couldn't go on the record for various reasons. But I was really struck by the breadth of people who were affected by this issue. We're talking about people who had COVID, people who were in nursing homes or at the end of their lives. People who were seeking transplants. So it really seemed to be an issue that were affecting people all across society, and that people found very difficult and struggled with. So I was really affected by just the breadth of experience in there.
And if you were to give advice to doctors, what would you say to doctors that are listening to this broadcast? We do a lot of medical shows. We have a lot of doctors that are out there, some of which have talked about this topic in the past. Others maybe haven't really looked at it. What would you advise a doctor to say to doctors on how to address the implicit bias that we all have. Because the idea is we're not trying to blame one group or any other group, but really we all have some kind of implicit bias at some level. How do we address it?
One of the lines that stuck with me, from Hardeep Singh, the expert in misdiagnosis, is that, oftentimes this happens because of, stale thinking and kind of knee-jerk writing. So, it's useful for all of us sometimes just take a sec and make sure that we're, fully considering, what we're writing and what we're thinking and doing, as opposed to just, going with the first, knee-jerk impression.
And do you think that we're moving in the right direction? You think more awareness is being brought to this topic? Because we've heard implicit bias before. I don't know what's happened in the last 10 years or so. I personally have not looked at it from the healthcare perspective. I know what I do with my body, with my doctors. I know what I've done with my loved ones and their doctors. But from what you've seen in your research, are people starting to really take this seriously?
It seems like people are taking it seriously. I feel like we're probably at kind of the beginning of dealing with this problem, just because we don't necessarily have perfect numbers or perfect figures for assessing this problem. So it's hard to know whether you're making progress or not if you don't really have very good statistics to track it.
And that's something we need to document. We need to make sure that people are aware of this. We do need to do a better job than starting to make these records and also to document it. A lot of the stuff, from what I understand, was coming through social media, particularly after COVID. During the pandemic, people were talking about more and more the different types of disparities they were experiencing, and the lack of communication and the miscommunication. And also in that time frame from 2020 till 21, you saw prioritizing going on. Certain places, certain people getting care or treatment, and others being kind of pushed off into the hallway to die of COVID. So that was something that actually happened and woke a lot of people up. Do you think that that's playing into the awakening of the beginning, as you mentioned, of this conversation starting?
It could be. I did find many of the patients I spoke with in this article through social media. So, it certainly could be.
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. I would love to see some more topics on this and also see what kind of trickles into case studies and more actual research. It seems that most of the research that I found was mostly based on university studies and a lot of medical students doing their own surveys. I believe the guys that I talked about in that 2016 study from University of Virginia, that was actually medical students, I believe. They actually did that. It wasn't something that was sponsored that I know of, that I'm aware of. It could be wrong. But that was something that, and they were even, they had they saw certain things in their training, and then they wanted to bring it to light. And so they decided to do a survey, and they surveyed tons and tons of doctors and medical students, and they found out that people that are being trained to learn biology had misconceptions about biology based on race and based on things of that nature, which is ironic to me. It's crazy to me.
One of the interesting sources for my article was based on some of these researchers getting their hands on tens of thousands of patients' records and using artificial intelligence to analyze the notes and see what descriptions kind of recurred more frequently with certain patients. And they sort of found that doctors were more likely to describe, especially black patients, as more aggressive or difficult than white patients. So I think we're at kind of the beginning of doing that kind of research. A lot of times, so one of the studies I'm thinking of was just out in Chicago. So just looking at one, set of records, tens of thousands of records in one city. So I imagine as people continue to work at this, we'll see more and more records across more and more cities to really get a handle of how frequent these kind of descriptions are.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that you kind of touched on, not directly, but the implications of what you wrote about. Like I said, I'm going to give you the title of this article, Embedded, How Medical Records Sow Discrimination. You can find it on the Daily Beast and also Cajun.org. We're going to see if we can get it on AHG.org, our website. one of the things that's I think is kind of profound about and touches on is the idea of, when we talk about bias and racial profiling and, misconceptions about race and, well, remember, for example, a doctor told me one time, well, you have high blood pressure, but all black people have high blood pressure. So don't worry about it. It's like, I'm not too concerned about with you because you're black and you have high blood pressure. And all my black patients have high blood pressure. Like that was something that was actually told to me. But looking at the reality is that oftentimes we because we're just looking at what we see, even someone who's a trained doctor who's looking at records, and he's giving me he's not lying to me. He's not telling me something that's not true, but he's prescribing the wrong reason to it. He's thinking because of my skin color, that's why I have high blood pressure. That's basically what he's saying. I'm not sure if he meant it that way or not. However, the reality is you have to look deeper and look at your environment, your nature, the nature versus nurture kind of argument, right? What types of stuff am I eating? Why am I eating these types of foods? Am I going to Popeyes or am I going to Panera Bread? What kind of stuff am I doing every day that causes me to have high blood pressure? That is more critical and more accurate as far as getting a proper diagnosis than, well, you're black. All these black guys have, every black guy I talk to, he's got high blood pressure. So he must be, I'm looking at you, I could see, yeah, you got high blood pressure. Sure, I knew it. Here it is right there. I knew it. But reality is that, okay, let's talk about diet. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, are you in a food desert or not? Let's talk about, what are you doing when you go to work? What kind of job do you have? Is it stressful or not? What types of things are going on in your world? Are you a military veteran? Maybe you have PTSD. Maybe that's part of your stress. Maybe that's part of your high blood pressure. All of these things. Your article, I think, is a tip of the iceberg to a lot of deeper questions that we can get into.
Absolutely, yeah, no question about it. Yeah,
man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on our show. Any last words?
No. I'm really happy to talk about the article.
And I look forward to many more articles. If you got any more coming out, let us know. We will have you back. And we appreciate what the things you're doing. This is from Kaiser Health News article, Embedded Bias, How Medical Records Sow Discrimination. You can find it on khn.org, the Daily Beast. Also, make sure you try to see it on our ahg.org. And we are talking to Darius Tahir. He is a tech correspondent with Kaiser Health News, and he focuses on how technology affects healthcare. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.